we've got the MakesSB spot and the LPP source here. If I do a show mount -E, you can actually see that those are NFS exported now to Gandalf. And if I was to look in boot P tab, there is now an entry that NIM added for Gandalf. So it's basically saying to it, you know, in TFTP boot, there's going to be some information for you. It gives you all the IPs and so on that it's going to use and the subnet mask. If you are going across to a different subnet, you'll also probably see a gateway that's sitting in there. If I now look in TFTP boot, you can see that I have a number of entries for Gandalf, and there should be you should always see a .info file. And there's also an IPL record and so on and so on. So there's usually about 5 or 6 entries for an individual LPAR, and you'll see the spots that are being exported and so on. So that's some of the basics of NIM, and now we're going to talk about some useful NIM commands. Occasionally when you build an LPP, it doesn't put the S images in there, which will make it very difficult to do a restore. If you get an error when you try to do something that indicates that, the NIM-O update recover yes command is what you're going to use to correct the LPP. I very, very rarely have that happen now because I make sure that I am giving my LPP access to everything that's on the CD when I build it. So I usually start with a clean LPP. In terms of allocations, you have the ability to deallocate and allocate resources. That's what these next couple of commands are showing you. Here I'm deallocating the LPP source and the spot and the MakesSB from my B740 NL1. And then just below it I'm reallocating them. Then we have the boss-inst command as well. Down the bottom I'm showing you how to add individual file sets if you just want to update the boss.games and boss.terminfo file sets. You have to know the exact file set name, but you can do that, and you can point at it. In this case I pointed it at the CD and told it to update LPP source 1. You can also remove them, and that's what the rm_images flag is doing on this very last line. So let's say you have a machine that's enabled for an install, all the NFS exports are done, and you decide that you really don't want to do it, or oh darn, I picked the wrong MakesSB image, or whatever. What you'll have to do is the NIM-O reset and force equals yes. So typically where I have to do this is where I start to do the pull install and something happens and I have to completely back out. And it leaves it in a funky state, so you pretty much are going to have to do a reset. You may also have to do a force deallocate, and you may have to reset the CPU ID. That was something that had to happen earlier on because one of the problems we ran into, in particular with Systems Director, was that if you're doing restores all the time from the same MakesSBs, there's a CPU ID in there, and it would pick up the same CPU ID, so System Director would discover the same one over and over again. With NIM at version 7 of AIX, that doesn't seem to happen anymore. It seems to, as one of the last steps of the install, it seems to go and correct that. There's a Tivoli GUID thing that I see running just before it boots. But these are some commands you may find useful. So we've got all our resources defined. We have our MakesSB image and so on, and we've done our NFS exports and everything else. So now we're going to go and do a pull install. And a lot of the stuff you can script if you're really good at scripting, but basically we're going to boot our client into SMS mode, either from the HMC or the server, and we're going to go and set up to do a boot across the network. The first thing you do is you go select option 2 for set up remote IPL. Now I've got here selecting 1 for the first Ethernet. You're going to select the correct Ethernet for you. If you've got multiple defined, then obviously you will select the one that is your primary management interface. And that would be the one that would get you to the NIM server. You're going to select IP version 4 and boot P. Obviously before you do this, you want to make sure that your NIM server has boot P uncommented and that you refreshed inetd. And then you're going to select your IP parameters. The client is going to be this LPAR's IP address. The server is the NIM server. I normally leave the gateway alone unless I'm going across subnets. Then you're going to hit escape and select 2 for adapter config. I always turn the spanning tree off. There's a number of reasons to doing it, but one of the main reasons is you will actually make your NIM implementation much, much faster, and it is significant. Then you're going to select your protocol, which tends to default to standard, and at the end I'm going to do a ping test. The ping test, if it fails, you definitely have a problem. If it's successful, that does not necessarily mean that your install will work, because there's other things that can happen. but if it's successful, it means you have communication. So we go back to the main menu and we select boot options. So you're going to select your boot device and select the network, and obviously make sure that you select the same network adapter that you picked up above. And then the thing that throws a lot of people is what you're going to select is normal boot mode boot. We all know it's a maintenance mode boot, but they actually call it normal mode. It's really that I just want to reboot, and I want to boot from whatever my default boot device is currently defined as. It's a little misleading, but it is a normal mode boot. So the server or LPAR should start booting, and you're going to see TFTP start up. It's roughly 30,000 packets. It can be a little more, a little less. And then if it's the first time that you've ever booted this, you may get a console prompt saying hit F1 and enter for the console. If you've used it before, you may not necessarily get that prompt. So you'll then put in 1 for English. You may or may not get this error message about all LVs being created exactly as they were, but the disks are not the same. That could be because you're restoring to slightly different sized disks or something like that. So unless you think there's a reason not to, just go ahead and click 1 to continue with the installs. I never assume that the install settings are correct, so I will go and check the install settings. I make sure that only 1 disk is here and that it's the correct one. Now, if you're restoring a mirrored system, then you're going to have to, and you didn't do an image data, then you're going to have to pick 2 disks to restore to. But you pick, in my case I chose HDisk 0, you would choose whichever HDisk really matches up with the one you want RootVG to go to. And I don't tend to use maps for installation. Most of the things that are there, once I've got the right disk, I just select 0 to continue. It will then basically go through and it will do the installation. At the end of the installation, it's going to boot, it's going to come up, you better remember the root password, and at that point you can remirror RootVG, you can do any tailoring, you can import volume groups and so on. And as you're going through, you can use the ls-nim-l to just see how far the installation has gone. So that's pretty much some of the basics of NIM, and I know this is motherhood and apple pie, but it's good to have these as a background, and particularly as you get new people coming in, it's nice to have this kind of thing to give them an idea of some of the things that they'll be doing. I have on this slide here, I have a bunch of useful commands. I'm not going to go through them. Just be aware that these are some of the commands you may need to know. And the infix command should have a lowercase I, not a capital I. That's PowerPoint trying to help me. On the master, we've already looked at the output of an ls-nim-l on our machine resource. You can also have it run against the makesysb resource. And the interesting thing about that is it actually gives you the equivalent of an OS level -R. It will tell you the version, the release, and the mod. So basically it'll give you version and TL. It'd be really nice if it gave you service pack as well, but it doesn't. So that's why I put that in the name. You can do the same thing for an LPP source, and I always put comments in when I create my LPPs so that I remember what they were, even though it's in the name. There may be some additional comments in there, like I might put in there, AIX61TL5, SP1 customized to include, I don't know, WebSphere. But having comments in there makes it useful for other people. And by the way, this is where it shows you whether that simages is correct. If it says simages equals no, you'll have to go back and do that recover that was on one of the earlier slides if you want to create a bootable image from this LPP. This is just showing you the same thing for the spot, and again it's going to show me the OS level -R output, and you can also see down the bottom that this is a chirp 64 spot. So it gives you a bunch of information about that spot. You'll also see that there is a file called NIM-info, and in that you'll see a number of exports that are related to NIM. This is actually when we talk about backing up the NIM database, this is one of the files we'll back up. So it's defining the NIM master and the ports that it's going to speak on. So for instance, if in your in your data center, they had ports 1058 and 1059 blocked, you would either have to go and request that they be unblocked or change the ports for the NIM master and NIM registration to different ports that they haven't blocked. So you can get the information out of this to then give to your firewall people. If we look in obj repos and we look for like NIM star, you'll see there's a number of NIM objects in there. That becomes important when we start to want to back up and restore NIM. Take a makes this be of the NIM server and you'll get all of this. But just in case you corrupt your NIM database, and speaking as one who's rebuilt NIM many, many times and gets bored with it very quickly, saving these databases is actually quite useful. Every couple of weeks I'll take a copy of these files onto another server, or I may tar them up and just drop them down to my PC in case something happens I lose all my NIM information. NIM info is going to be required on the master and all of the running NIM clients. You can rebuild it on the master, and if necessary you can point the master at one of the clients that's running and it will rebuild it on the master from that client. What that tells you is, as I mentioned before in the NIM info file, we have those ports that are listed in there. So if you end up using non-standard, as in not 1058 or 1059, then you need to make sure that all of the NIM clients have the correct NIM ports in there. So this is an example of a NIM info file on a client, and you can see that it's basically exporting the NIM name, which is the master name. It's telling me that I'm a standalone configuration. It's got the ports in there. It's telling me it's using NIM shell. It has the spot information, etc., and any NIM mounts that it's going to try to mount. So there's actually a lot of information that's in that client.